Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, the tension within Sudan. What should be done to avert a full-scale war? There has been a lot of concern at both the international and regional levels about an impending war between Sudan and South Sudan. Today, the situation got worse when Sudanese forces bombed some parts of South Sudan, just as the South moved out of Heglig, the regional town in Sudan, which they had stubbornly occupied for a week. President Bashir has indicated there will be no more talks with the South, saying Khartoum is ready to overthrow the Southern regime, which he says is led by insects. Strong language there. The situation in the two countries is a major concern, given the fact that an all-out war could result into instability in many surrounding countries, including Uganda, and possibly even benefiting the LRA, which had previously been linked to Khartoum. Uganda has already indicated that it will not hesitate to intervene if the situation gets out of control so as to protect its interests. The two countries are on the brink of war because of failing to agree on how to handle oil. But analysts have also added that the independence by the South was never really accepted by Khartoum, even though they showed some public acceptance through their president, Mr. Bashir. Some other people have also said that the rivalry between the US and China, China of course is becoming a strong force in these affairs, could be at play. Now, the African Union has failed to deal with the situation after several days of pleas from the UN. But today, President Barack Obama and the EU have spoken, saying both countries should do everything possible to avoid war. So tonight we look at the Sudanese crisis, the likely impacts on the region, and what needs to be done to avert a full-scale war. Our guest tonight, Mr. Sammy Gwada Ogot, a Pan-African political analyst, also coming from the Citizens Coalition for Electoral Democracy. You're most welcome, Mr. Gwada Ogot.
Good evening.
We're also joined by Mr. Joseph Mwambazi from the Center for Defense and Diplomatic Affairs. You're most welcome, Mr. Mwambazi.
Thank you.
Also joined by Mr. Ainomugisha, Head of the Peace and Security Program at ACODE. You're most welcome, Dr. Ainomugisha.
Thank you, and good evening, listeners and viewers.
Mr. Gwada, can you give us the genesis of this crisis?
Thank you very much. One is the conflict in Sudan traces back to almost over 800 years from the year 1200, when the Arabs dismantled the Shilluk dynasty that had been in charge of large and vast parts of Sudan and other parts of East Africa. The name Sudan essentially means black, which in itself denotes the fact that the entire territory called Sudan was black man's land. And that is why when the SPLM former leader, the late John Garang, always prioritized the need for a unitary state and not the fracture. The fracture was always a second and unfortunate option. Well, that's why he fought for a unified Sudan, because it was all about reclaiming and setting the country to what it originally was, Sudan, the land of the black man. The split of Sudan was a last and consolationist resort that gave Sudan half of what it had taken, the South Sudan a place, and primarily because it had a deep history in terms of what it is called Sudan, and the Arabs were essentially businessmen and other forms of traders who had come in and long distance who had set up trading posts along the way. That goes to explain the historical background. Two, there is also the religious background, where there is the Sudan has become a ground for a contest between Islam and Christianity, and with the north, the Arab north, being supported by Libya for a long time, and of course with the Americans and other Christian groups supporting the south. Thirdly, there is also the issue of the racial aspects of this conflict, where the Arab, in his wisdom, believes that the black man or the Southern Sudanese is essentially a slave and a human being who must be treated as lesser than himself. So all these conflicts compounded and the conflict maintained. But in many ways, the Southern Sudanese, in spite of the interventions by the Takoman, the Germans, the English, the Takoman Empire.
The Takoman Empire.
Yes, the Germans, the British, the Arabs. To their credit, they were never assimilated. And however long it took, they essentially won their independence after years and years of struggle. And in that context, when we look at Sudan, or the South Sudan, we must also appreciate that the Southern Sudanese are indeed today the most dispersed people in the world, probably only in comparison to the Jews. They may not have the same communication network to support or to promote their cause, but they have been the most dispersed people in the world, maybe more than the Jews. How that relates in terms of history, we still do not know, or what kind of historical bearing it has. But Sudan is in the process, or the south of Sudan has been in the process of trying to create structures, trying to create unity within itself, trying to find itself from the ashes that had been burning, or from the fire that had been burning into ashes for nearly 900 to 1,000 years. The fact that they have fought and that they have won requires that they are given every support. If anybody has had the experience of going to South Sudan to see that there are no structures, the Arab North completely ostracized the South in terms of any form of infrastructure. There was no civic authority, absolutely. There was no form of governance. Chiefs and peoples were taken and co-opted into the northern way. People were compelled. People would be herded and whipped into mosques to be Islamized. I mean, what they have gone through and the fact that they have won is indeed in itself a story of fortitude. It is a story of great hope, and it is a story that indeed, in spite of any shackles that may be placed on you, there is always the chance that humanity, sobriety, and peace can prevail. I believe this, what is being done by the north of Sudan, are the last kicks of a dying horse, because the reality is that South Sudan is independent.
Yes.
The reality is that the north never accepted this independence.
Yes.
The reality is that al-Bashir is under intense pressure in Khartoum, because he lost nearly $7 billion in terms of budgetary allocations that was accruing from Sudan directly over the next 4 or 5 years. How he can bridge that gap has become an impossibility. The reality is that when Southern Sudan was getting its independence, they were under intense provocation by the North, and that they maintained their calm at great with great strength. I was there for a month and a half just before and during the independence. What they were subjected to is unacceptable. And if independence was going to be won through peace and through the acceptance of insult and abuse during that period,
they paid the price.
Let it be, and they paid their price. Today, the worry is that this war may escalate when you look at it in view of what is going on in Somalia, that has sort of sucked in the whole region at both informal and formal levels. We have the UPDF, the Kenya Army, we have Burundi, Rwanda, all sucked in Somalia. But on the flip side, we also have Islamist extremists from Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, all have also sucked in the place. Now it becomes a very tricky situation in that regard. Thank you.
Yeah, because I've not been to Joe, I've been told that they have hardly 100 kilometers of tarmac road.
Yes, hardly.
That's not from here to Lugazi. You don't get Lugazi.
Hardly,
All right, Mr. Mwambazi, do you think a full-scale war can be averted? Bashir has told his soldiers today, he's not going to talk. Do you think they can avoid war? He's called them insects.
Yes.
And he says he's going to overthrow the SPLM.
Yes. Actually, this is actually what I even predicted when I appeared on NTV during the referendum and the independence celebrations. I made it clear to all those who could listen that the CPA,
the Comprehensive Peace Agreement,
was actually not comprehensive.
Yes.
It was actually not the appropriate solution to the Sudanese crisis. The CPA was imposed upon the Sudanese people. And actually even the late General Galanga was held hostage by actually by the Nasir faction. Remember, the Nasir faction was headed by Dr. Riek Machar.
Riek Machar, the rebel. He tried to break away from the SPLA.
And Lama Kol.
The two rebels.
There is Gordon Kwar, somebody say like that, yes. Those are the people actually who did their best to prevent Garang from realizing his the dream of a united Sudan.
Yes.
Remember, Garang had what we call the Torit faction. 1991.
Yes.
There was that split.
Yes.
The progressive element.
I know Riek Machar came. Yes. He called a press conference that which I attended here in the Sheraton.
Of course.
Lama called.
Of course.
In 19.
So it was electionary. The progressive forces led by General John Garang, Colonel John Garang by then.
Yes.
And the Yasalaman.
Yes.
And all those that were inspired by him from across the board, not even in the South alone, but across the board, remember, believed in John Garang. And actually we lost a great leader who would transform the Sudan.
Yes.
Remember, now, the lobbyists in the US, through the Bush administration, and then the issue, the experience of the September 11, all those led to this issue of the CPA.
Yes.
And the Moi Foundation, actually the Moi Foundation took advantage of that. Yes. Again, the political capital and all that. And they, with due respect to President Moi and General Lazarus, who did a lot.
Sumbe.
And the Vice President of Kenya.
Yes.
Kalonzo Musyoka was the foreign minister. They did a lot. But remember, this was not comprehensive. In order to solve the problems of Sudan, actually,
yes,
you have to have something that is comprehensive.
What should they have done?
Now, they would have, because this was between two political forces.
Yes.
It was between the National Congress Party, headed by the extremist leadership, actually,
yes,
and the SPLA, which SPLA was actually dominated by the Nasir faction,
yes,
the separatists.
Yes.
That's why it was even painful for Garang to sign that peace agreement. Because we were close to it,
that's
I can tell you.
We had the ramblings that wasn't in support of it.
Remember, John Garang inspired many people. It was not actually the South was there was a front in the South and the Western Front of SPLA.
Yes.
The SPLA mainstream added the Southern Front. That is the South up to North Kordofan.
Yes.
There was the Western Front in Darfur, headed by Wahid Nur al-Nur. That's what they call SLM.
Yes.
Actually, John Garang objected because he wanted it. Wahid Nur, after his actual completion of his degree from Khartoum University,
yes,
he proposed to John Garang that let us form a front in Darfur.
All right.
Because he's a Darfurian.
Okay.
And they wanted it to be SPLA. But John Garang objected and said, let us remove the P and leave it as SLM.
Yes.
That was the other front. Remember, John Garang, the late John Garang,
yes,
was appointed to be the leader of the National Democratic Front.
In Khartoum.
Now in Asmara. Asmara convened a conference in 1997 of all the opposition forces and fighting groups in Sudan. The Women Party, led by Sadiq Ahmad.
Yes.
The Unionist Democratic Party of Asman al-Magani.
Yes.
The Beja Congress.
All right. Okay.
And all those people.
Okay.
And actually, John Garang was made to be the commander-in-chief.
Of all this, he was a very respected man.
Yes. What needs to be done at this moment is actually the United Nations. Actually, we should not leave this work to the UN alone.
Yes.
AU,
yes,
the African Union.
What should we do?
We should actually the United Nations and the Security Council,
yes,
should come in and help mediators.
All right.
Like me, I'm ready to convene an all Sudanese conference. And all Sudanese.
You want them to come back together after that?
Yes, yes.
All right.
In Khartoum.
We'll talk about that.
Right.
I mean, John Garang is a very intelligent man. I interviewed him. And I've interviewed several.
He's dead. I think you need to.
The late John Garang.
Yes,
He's one of the most intelligent people I've met, and I've met several I've interviewed many heads of state. He's a very, very intelligent man, or was. Some people live on even after they are dead because their works. I'll ask you two questions, Doctor. Did it have to come to this one? Secondly, is there foreign power interests here?
Thank you very much, Edmond. First, it should have been predicted that the Sudan question was not a complete issue when Southern Sudan got its independence. Actually, what the guarantors of CPA should have foreseen is that actually, first of all, Khartoum had grudgingly accepted, of course, the separation, and they did everything they could actually to fail even the referendum. That's the time when there was an increased bombing and actually takeover of Abyei. So Southern Sudan, Northern Khartoum, has always wanted to fail Southern Sudan, and actually even after the referendum, Khartoum has continued to support proxy wars within Southern Sudan to fail, because they had predicted that Southern Sudan has no capacity to govern itself. They can only be governed by the Arabs in the north.
Right.
So in order to prove that point, they have always supported the proxies. Of course, it's also it has also been alleged, of course denied by Southern Sudan, that they have also been supporting proxy wars or the liberation movements in Darfur, South Kordofan, and Brunei. So the war, that's one. But the second thing, of course, the CPA, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, left the borders undemarcated.
Yes, that's true.
That was the seed of destruction. That was a ticking bomb. And so Abyei, Blue Nile, and all these South Kordofan remained glaring points that could actually unravel any time. And that's why, of course, one needs to blame the international community that all this time they looked the other side. So it was bound to happen. But also now we need to look at the material conditions obtaining in Southern Sudan and Northern Sudan. Southern Sudan, as my brother rightly put it, is a very fragile state. It's a fragile state, and no one should condemn them, because what should have happened after the independence, the international community should have come in to build the state from the ground, because they were building from the ground. Years of slavery and destruction, and now they are only left to use the oil money and small support from here.
Which oil they can't sell now?
Which oil, and now oil, of course, revenue is no longer there. So they needed a Marshall Plan to build the country.
By the international community.
Yeah, and so, of course, because of the proxy wars by Sudan, the fragility has always increased, making it difficult for the state to concentrate on building the infrastructure of the state, but fighting some of these breakaway factions. So, of course, then a war with an enemy now becomes important in terms of building the state, because it strengthens internal cohesion. But it's the same thing in Sudan, in Khartoum, because of the loss of revenue, 7 billion oil revenue that is talked about, because of the loss of the whole country with all those natural resources, because actually it is Southern Sudan that has most of the resources.
Yes.
It's green, agriculture, it's very fertile, but it also has the oil. Now, Bashir has to justify why he lost that one, because also his government is very fragile. So a war with the South strengthens. Of course, he's trying now to mobilize internal support to an external enemy. So I think both of them, fragile states, find it very useful to fight a war for internal strengthening. Now, you asked the question of whether there is an
foreign power,
some foreign power involved. I think what we are seeing here, it may not be about the external power involved, but we have to accept and realize that actually behind the oil production, exploration, and production in Khartoum is China. Right. China has a lot of concessions and over oil, but also in the south. In the south, a lot of other people are interested. Of course, the U.S. I think is one of the interested parties, but that has nothing, I think, now to do with the war. But of course, countries that have a natural resource abundance always attract those interests,
foreign,
which is a lot of
bees to nectar.
Yeah, like bees attracted to the honey.
Right.
So that was bound.
That bound to happen. And it's not a big thing. Okay, we're going for a break, but
yes,
we'll talk about. Of course, General Salva Kiir right now is in China. Very interesting. We'll talk about that when we come back from the break. I know that China has been trying to ramp up its production of gold, which has not been able to help them meet the financing gap. Well, listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio, and we'll be back to stay tuned.
When Junior lost his appetite, his mother tried all methods to get him to eat. She tried scary stories.
Eat, Tommy, eat, or the big black elephant will come and eat all your food.
She tried magic.
Tommy, if you eat your food, I will turn this handkerchief into sweets. Look, bumble, bumble, boom, boom.
Then she discovered Apertol multivitamin syrup with lysine.
Mommy, I finished all the food. I am number 1.
Apertol multivitamin with lysine is helping mothers to turn mealtime frustration to a fun moment. Apertol has a great taste and contains lysine, which quickly improves your child's appetite and supports healthy growth. Apertol, help for life.
John, Mike and I, we go back a bit. We knew John at the beginning, working for someone else. But he was different. He had vision, saw opportunities. He started working towards his goal, opened his own garage, and worked, learning the hard way. His reputation spread. Trust, consistency, quality. Soon people were coming to him from all parts. He made himself and his whole street prosper, and also helped friends, seeing potential in people and helping them on. But John never shouts about all his success. He's just who he is. Special.
So here's to men like John, who make a difference, who enjoy Nile Special, the rich, satisfying taste from the source. Nile Special. You've earned it.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Accept no substitutes.
Radio 1, FM 90.
Welcome back to Spectrum on Radio. And tonight, this tension in Sudan, what should be done to avert full-scale war? Remember, such a war could suck in a lot of countries. The DR Congo was sucked in 8 countries, killing 2 million people over a time space. Sudan could be even more combustive because of the oil that has been flowing. Now it has stopped. Some people have estimated it could suck in up to 10 countries, some of them not with borders that necessarily touch on that vast state, that vast territory, 2 countries. Our guest tonight, Mr. Sammy Gwada Ogot. He's a Pan-African political analyst. He comes from this ACODE, that's the Citizens Coalition for Electoral Democracy. Mr. Joseph Mwambazi, for the first time on this show, is from the Center for Defense and Diplomatic Affairs, and Mr. Dr. Ainomugisha, head of the Peace and Security Program at ACODE. You two will be able to contribute to this discussion. Gwada, Salva Kiir is in China. What will China tell him? What will Beijing tell him?
I think it's important to note that one, today and I think yesterday, Bentiu was bombed by South Sudan Air Force planes.
This morning.
Over the last couple of days during this during the conflict, Chinese arms have been found on the ground in Zhao, which was hit, I think, 2 or 3 days ago.
That's South Sudan.
Chinese arms, so arms marked with Chinese markings,
inscription,
have already been found in that region. Now, that means that there is also an external arm pushing interest here. There has been a global war between America and China that has been raging for a couple of years, and this might.
Where is that war? Tell us exactly where that war is.
Well, it comes in because of resources.
Where is that war? Is it the one in Sudan?
Now it's unfolding. Probably that has become the battleground, or may eventually become the battleground.
You're talking about a cold war that has been going.
A cold war that has been going on between the 2 nations
in Sudan as a contact point.
Yes.
Go on.
During the independence of South Sudan, the Americans gave possibly the strongest diplomatic statement in support of the Sudanese government and pledged to do everything to support the new nation. China, on the other hand, was very cautious in its approach and sought to try and find ways to mitigate on what its potential losses could be in terms of oil revenue. Now, that was very telling about what was coming. Two, there's the issue of interdependency between the two states.
Yes.
South Sudan has the resources,
yes,
but the only way that it can push the resources to the market is through the north. Because the north has the pipeline and the refinery.
And they want a split, not once a split, not simply a few.
No, and they have, in fact, what triggered off this when people met, when there was a meeting in Ethiopia, I think a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago, the interpersonal relations were so bad between the two because the Sudan promised that if they cannot get the proper share, which is $37 per barrel, they were simply going to take the oil away.
Serve themselves.
And that was made to a statement.
Then apparently they tried to build a secret pipeline according to
to get it. So they believe that they have a sense of entitlement, or what they have exhibited is a sense of entitlement that is sometimes hard to fathom in view of these circumstances. But ultimately, what also worries in regard to this region is to the Sudanese, to the Sudans, is that across the region of East Africa, there is an economic shift that is taking place.
Yes.
East Africa is becoming an oil-rich region. There is oil in Kenya. There is oil in Uganda. There is oil in Tanzania.
Gas in Tanzania.
And
oil offshore.
And all this is definitely transforming the region, not politically but economically. Now, how this could impact, because this is a resource war in Sudan ultimately, besides the issues of identity, race and religion. How will this generally impact on the whole region in terms of movement of people, destruction of systems, and all
we'll talk about that, but let's get some context here. Internationally, if you normally they charge about $6 maximum per barrel of oil. South Sudan 137 is about 6 times, which is ridiculous.
It's unrealistic.
Let's, Mr. Mwambazi, talk to us about which countries could be sucked into this war in case it happened.
Yeah, this the nation that could be sucked. Actually, this is of great concern to the region.
Yes,
because the security of Sudan is actually, if Sudan is secure, then the East African region is well.
Yes.
Now, if Uganda could go in.
Yes.
If at all the extremists in power, led by General Omar el-Bashir, try to re-implement their terrorist foreign policy, that is to sponsor forces against liberty.
It's not they sponsor the LRA.
Yes, like the LRA, which I think again is practically impossible at the moment. And again, in return, if they try to sponsor, as they used to sponsor against the leadership of Chad,
about the Awuzo Street.
Yes, but now it brings in the question of China and Russia.
Go on.
And
distant lands.
And I believe that United Nations, the US, cannot come in without consulting those powers, because China has a great role to play in Sudan, North and South.
Yes.
So, and Uganda cannot go in. Actually, just as just as others were saying in response to what the general said, the Chief of Defense Forces.
Right.
But Uganda cannot go in. We cannot disregard China and go in like that. It is practically impossible. What actually, and even Kenya, with the use of Somalia, the commitments in Somalia, where they are doing a wonderful job. For the first time, actually, the Kenyan army deserves to be saluted for that. They cannot commit themselves to that. And Ethiopia cannot. But what we have to do actually...
You're saying these countries might not be interested in war?
Absolutely.
Yes. Why?
Because they cannot sustain it against...
It's too expensive.
The Sudan, that is, the Khartoum government, that is backed by China.
You think China will go with Khartoum and not Juba?
Absolutely.
Well, Salva Kiir is right now in Beijing.
Of course.
But how do you explain the timing?
The investments they have in the north.
How do you explain the timing? There's more potential in the south. They've got more oil. They're thinking of building a $13 billion complex in Lambo. It's more than a port. 3 cities, 3...
Absolutely. That is not for tomorrow.
Well, it's thinking of. That's what I future lies.
Yes, but
Sudan, not
yes, but we have to be realistic actually. The issue of Ram is not going to happen tomorrow, like a miracle. it's going to take long.
Sure, but it could start. It could take 10 years, 15 years, but it's also so they have to sign somewhere 13 billion, whatever.
Yes, but I don't think that the South Sudan government will forever wait for them.
Why would Sudan? Why would China go with the north instead of the south? It
yes,
was not
they have that French
country. Yes, ideology.
Yes, of course. And you know they sponsored the North when they were attacking the Darfurians.
Yes,
they have been helping militarily, just as my brother has said.
They have been helping the South.
Yes, of course. Yes. So what needs to be done is for all the Sudanese actually
to sit together and talk again.
Because let me talk about this. The South has got some problems.
Yes.
There are rebel groups fighting against the SPLM. The South Sudan Liberation Army
within the SPLM itself.
Yes, of course.
Different dissenting voices.
There is the South Kordofan issue. Actually, the divisions of SPLA.
All right. They still.
Yes,
we have to move forward. Okay. Dr. Ainomugisha, again, 2 questions. Should Uganda have declared its own armed interests that early? Also, what are the implications of this statement by Aaron Nyakairima, the CDF, Chief of Defense Forces?
No, I think that General Ronda was misquoted. It was quoted out of context, and I was in that meeting. Actually, I organized the meeting where he spoke, and that meeting was organized by ACODE and the Institute for Defense Analysis. So it was quoted out of the context. But General Ronda was talking about, because the meeting was about regional military security, and we're talking about how the militaries, an increasing role of militaries to foster peace and security in the region. And then, of course, the journalist just picked the other one. But it is also true that actually the LRA, the information, the intelligence information on the ground shows that the LRA is getting into contact with Khartoum to, of course, take advantage, because they have always been used as proxies in this war. But let me just quickly comment about the possibility, how this conflict is likely to unfold.
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, the economic situation in the world and the international politics do not support this war.
Yes.
And therefore, we are not likely to see a full-scale war.
There's no appetite for war in the world.
There is no appetite. First of all, the economies are battered. But even Sudan itself, they can only make those war drums, but they have no capacity to actually launch a full-scale war because it's not sustainable.
They cannot be able to buy food.
Khartoum is not an economic power. It's not a military power. They have no capacity, money, and everything, and military power to sustain that war. But of course, at the international level, those messages are for the internal constituencies. China is also not likely to to go in full scale, and the US and Russia over that one. In any case, the region itself has been balanced by the discovery of oil in Uganda, gas in Tanzania, and oil in Kenya. And all these countries are already there. China is here in Uganda, and they know that Uganda is a traditional and historical ally of Southern Sudan. They would not want to jeopardize that. So moving forward, but of course, we could see a war. We could see some proxy war involving these forces in a very indirect manner. But of course, the United Nations here is going to play a very big role. And I think when it comes in, even Southern Sudan has no capacity actually to wage a sustainable war. They don't have the revenues. They suspended the oil production, and so they don't have it. But they have made a statement, as my brother Nanka rightly said it, because they have sustained a lot of provocation from Southern Sudan, and as a nation from Khartoum, and as a nation state, as a young state, they have to portray that sovereignty and to defend it.
Is that why they wanted to?
Yes, that's a psychological war they have. Right. They went in, they have used much of their resources to cover Hegelig and occupied that place for a whole week. Beat up that. You see, there is that psychological liberation that comes when the oppressed also is able to put down the oppressor, and they have made a statement. Actually, the most wounded person is Khartoum, because they go to the beating. Yes, but so what? And that's why I said we will go to Juba, liberate people, and that kind of thing. But I also, so they have no capacity. Both countries don't want that war, and I think that provides an opportunity for peacemakers, for the international community now to come in first of all and deploy international peacekeeping force, create a buffer, and start actually demarcating the international borders, and also solving the issues of Abyei, the oil in Abyei, and this Hegelig, which now Southern Sudan now claims is part of it.
All right.
So I thought that that one, but Uganda also, you have to understand, and I think my brother was talking about it, that Southern Sudan really, to be honest, is a Ugandan project.
Yes.
Uganda has supported
like many others. Somalia.
I think Uganda showed that the greatest responsibility and made a lot of losses. I remember at the swearing at the independence.
Yes.
When Southern Sudan declared in
July 9th.
I think one of the top leaders said that within this Southern Sudan, there are so many beautiful bonds of beautiful men and women from Uganda. So it is imperative for Uganda that has made such a kind of investment to see that investment unravel. So some of these statements are also calculated, and I think they are good to send a message to Khartoum, which thinks it can move to the people it has brutalized for thousands of years and reverse the gains. So I think they have to get that message. So we are likely to see involvement of these regional countries, but I think they are going to come in from initiatives from the international.
The US has spoken today. Barack Obama gave a long statement.
Yes.
The EU has spoken a few hours ago. The UN spoke. Of course, Salva Kiir earlier had said we will only come out of Heglig if the UN deploys a buffer zone, just like you said.
Yes, they withdrew without that, because, and unfortunately for Southern Sudan, when they responded, everybody condemned Southern Sudan. And actually, I was telling my colleague here that I think they didn't do their diplomacy very well, because these are victims who have been now condemned.
Okay. We have to go to hear from the listeners. And of course, you mentioned propaganda. General Bashir said a Reuters reporter was in that place. He said only 3 people were killed by the Sudan bombing, the Khartoum bombing. Khartoum says they killed 30. They added a 0 to the figure. So as you say, the truth has been first casualty, like happened many times before. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. You can call in now. Our numbers 0414-348-111, 0312-260-390, 0312-261-390. When you call in, please tell us your name and where you are calling from. Tonight we're discussing the tension in Sudan. What should be done to avert a full-scale war? Spectrum, hello? Hello?
Hello, Spectrum?
Yes, sir. You're live on Spectrum. Your name?
Okay, my name is Joseph. I'm calling from Kampala.
Yes, Joseph.
Thank you for the program. A contribution is just I think before, of course, it has its negative side, and I think it's also good for us as Ugandans.
There, really strong words. All right, let's get to that. Let's get back to this. Okay, Spectrum, hello. Moses in Luero, yes. Okay, Spectrum, hello. Yes, sir, your name?
And my comment here is.
Come again, with your name? I think we've got the gist of that contribution. Let's carry it there. Let's get back to the studio. Gwada.
There's one issue. I will probably start with the comments by Joseph about the incidences against Ugandans in Juba. It is very unfortunate, primarily because I think Uganda stands out as the nation that actually put boots on the ground. That is besides Eritrea and Ethiopia. And it has been a very unfortunate situation. about the treatment of Ugandans in Juba. But again, the issue has often boiled down to matters of survival, economic survival, competition for scant jobs, opportunities and resources. And I think in many ways, the leaderships of the two nations should be more proactive in handling this issue to resolve it once and for all. Because many Ugandans died in Juba. And amongst the teams that the groups of people...
Ugandans died not in the Liberation War.
In the Liberation War.
All right.
In the Liberation
and
War.
Now they're dying killed by their own
some have died after the war. But you note that people Eritreans who participated in the war, many of them are quite comfortable and accepted as brothers in Juba. That is quite notable. So sometimes you ask yourself, is it because the Eritreans have engaged in business on a higher scale than the Ugandans who have been doing a lot of the
tomatoes and
import-export? Is it the nature of commerce that Ugandans engage in that is causing them to be in conflict with Sudan? But again, you will also understand that the conflict, the social conflicts in Sudan is not only xenophobic,
yes,
but it is also intra-Sudanese. The Sudanese, the returnees are not readily being accepted by those who stayed and persevered during the war. Many of them are being rejected because where were you when we fought? So like we said earlier, the issue of Sudan is complex and requires the understanding of almost every single individual who has a humanistic feeling towards that country. They should not be condemned, but I think there should be more focus by the regional states and particularly Uganda in terms of resolving the issue of what has been happening on the ground. I have not had any specific action bringing people together in Uganda, bringing Ugandan and Southern Sudanese nationals in Juba, in Kampala, to try and help resolve these issues. Because when people speak about these issues, the responsibility and the need to do something is shared across a wider spectrum of people, and that people then are able to intervene and accept each other as brothers and sisters. And particularly in view of the regional integration process, which I believe that on 27th of this month, the East African community will be determining the application of South Sudan in a couple of days to come.
Right.
So that must be one of the focus of regional cohesion and integration. Two, the next statement that has been made by Moses. When I spoke earlier about this, the conflict lasting nearly 1,000 years, he has brought in the Palestinian-Israel conflict. When I spoke about the historical context and what this process might bring in history, I had sort of something like that in mind. At the point when the world's oldest civilization, Egypt, was losing track, and which had stood in the way of Southern Sudanese independence for hundreds of years, South Sudan was rising out of the ashes as Israel was collapsing on its own. Libya, a traditional ally of Egypt in this process, was also undergoing an internal collapse when Sudan was arising. And it's just about 1,000 years. And these are issues that have come in with biblical prophecies. Is Southern Sudan, or is the process in Southern Sudan the subject of a prophecy? I don't know. But it is important to look at it from all angles, historical and all manner, to try and get a solution to this thing. Because we don't know.
I mean, the debate excites when it gets to the level where you say only 1,000 years, I get really
excited. You know.
Mr. Mwambazi, talk to us about, respond to the listeners' calls.
Yes.
I get really interested when you begin to say just 1,000 years. You get my interest. Go on.
Joseph talked about the issue of mistreatment of the people of Uganda who stood by the Sudanese in their hour of need. This is quite unfortunate.
Yes.
And the Sudanese government should not pay lip service to this issue. Actually, the South Sudanese leadership should not pay lip service because they know they have a lot here in Uganda. We welcome them.
But we go, you're selling gonja. It happens everywhere. If you go fighting for jobs with a common man, they'll fight.
Yes, but there should always be justice.
It's in the Europe.
Justice has to be in place. Our people should not be mistreated.
Maybe you should legislate. You don't come here and sell gonja. Invest in serious things like that.
And remember, even the border, the question of the border. Is it Rafogi in the northern West now?
Yes.
Where the Sudanese armed
attacked us.
Continue to attack our people, which is very unfortunate. Because what if these people who gave them comfort turn away from them?
Right.
This is quite bad, and the leadership of the two nations should deal with this question.
Should have a summit.
Yes. And then the question of is the Palestinian-Israel issue of experience of that.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think that this should come in. And we should not think that the northern leader, because we are talking about the leadership in power.
Yes.
There is the leadership in power and the people of the Republic of Sudan.
Yes.
You shouldn't be mistaken to think that all the people of the Republic of Sudan support this war.
All right. Our time is up.
Yeah, let me.
Doctor, you have about 3 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, of course, the killing of Ugandan businessmen in Sudan is regrettable. But I think, let me say this, that normally for countries that are emerging from war to peace, immediately after the peace has been secured, there is always an escalation of violence. And we have seen it in most war-torn societies. In South Africa, you are advised not to move actually even 3 meters from Johannesburg airport. The level of violence went up, and this was violence by the victims themselves. This is the same thing that is happening in the Sudan. Normally those people, they have not seen anything but violence. They have been dispossessed.
It's a culture that's in their mind.
It's a culture of violence.
In South Africa around 95, shortly after it had ended.
Exactly. It's a culture of war-torn societies. So what is happening in Sudan is not unique to all war-torn societies. But you see, eventually...
It's not unique to them. It's unique to
all societies. It is expected. Right. But actually, when the government, when the state is built, the state capacity in the process of being built, you will see the escalation. So normally after the peace, there is escalation of violence, and then as the state consolidates, there is a escalation. But number two, this is not an official position of the government of Juba. They also actually are caught in this kind of thing. So the people in Uganda are angry about the level of violence emitted at our people, but they should not condemn the government of Juba. I agree with my brother that there's a need for the government of Uganda and Juba to work together to protect the traders, because it's these traders that are building a country from bottom up. The other thing, of course, that my brother talked about, the Israel Palestinian question. It cannot. They are not related at all. But what is likely? What is likely to happen is that these are two sovereign states. These are sovereign states which hate each other. So they hate each other. So what needs to be done, of course, is to build infrastructure for peace between the two nations.
How do you do that?
And to build infrastructure for peace, here you are talking about the need, for instance, the two countries to trade together. And the international community.
Let's get it clear. Yes. South Sudan say we'll take our oil through your country, and these people ask for an extortionist rate.
You see the mindset is still Bulgarian.
How because they have been fighting like a balance between $60 and $37.
Yes, it's Bulgarian, it is anger, and you see, of course, it's from a conflict resolution perspective. So the infrastructure of peace, you have to support these guys to trade together, to establish like a joint education systems, telecommunication, so that now people can now learn to benefit from each other. So that when there's a problem in Khartoum, the people in the south, but that takes time. And I think the international community invests consistently in building that infrastructure.
We have to end here. Very interesting debate we had tonight with our guest, Mr. Sammy Gwada Ogot, a Pan-African political analyst, also working with CCEDU, that's the Citizens Coalition for Electoral Democracy. Thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you.
Very stimulating discussions. Mr. Joseph Mwambazi, Center for Defense and Diplomatic Affairs. The first time I heard about it, I thought that was Washington. It sounds very, very much like Washington. Thank you very much for coming here. And Dr. Einomugisha, of course, he's the head of the Peace and Security Program at ACODE. Thank you very much for building up into this debate.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond. The Spectrum will be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in English. Do stay tuned.
Hi, Dad. I'm still in New York. My flight back is delayed.
Oh, no. But Kwanjula is tomorrow. Now what about the Nkoko? Namatoke for the Bako.